Hey guys, this is a review of lecture 3334 for neuro exam, neuro material. We're going to do our best here. So, all right, so just a quick review. We have the different parts of the brainstem, so medulla, pons, and then midbrain. And then we'll be talking about we'll be talking about the thalamus today, and then some about the cerebrum as well. So medulla, pons, midbrain, thalamus. We're talking about the sensory pathways from the trigeminal nerve, and then the ascending sensory pathways, DCML and ALS. All right, so we are going to be dealing with different types of nerve fibers, and so in particular, we are going to be today dealing with type A beta, and then type C and type A delta. And so basically what we'll see is that of the ones we're talking about today, A beta is the largest diameter and will be faster than the other ones as a result. And then A delta slightly smaller, and then C very tiny unmyelinated. Okay. All right, so then just a reminder, so we have all of these nice cross sections, which we'll look at, but we have rostral is towards the nostril, and caudal is towards the claws, aka your hands and feet. Okay, so this is just a quick reminder. I think this particular set of material for this second exam is a little bit diabolical. So, keep calm, don't panic. You can do this. We have this little hedgehog cheering you on, and, this is fine. We'll make it through it. All right, so, do your best. Keep on keeping on. All right, so just to get us started, so a little bit of review. We have cervical segment, thoracic, lumbar, and then sacral. In terms of things that we need to know for these pathways, for ascending spinal pathways, we have our dorsal funiculi, the gracilis, and the cuneatus. This is white matter. We're also going to be dealing with the ventral white commissure right here, and then the anterior lateral sulcus right here. Okay, so not too bad. Then we had looking at the different layers of our spinal cord, and so this is our sacral layer. It is round shaped in the smallest diameter. And you can see that it has more gray matter than white matter. Why? Because there's not that much below the sacral last, right? And so this is myelinated axons, the white matter that's staining dark here. So it's not that much below it, so it doesn't need as much white matter. Okay, then you go up, you have the lumbar level, which we can see here. You have both more gray and white matter. And in particular, you have this large substantia gelatinosa, which we'll talk about when we're dealing with the ALS tract for pain. It has inhibitory neurons that will release opioids to mute pain. Then we have the thoracic level, and notice how massive the white matter is because we're getting further up in the spinal cord. And so you have more and more axons joining us from lower levels. And then you get to the cervical level, again, cervical right here. And notice how we're getting even bigger and bigger. And notice we now have the addition of, so we've had the gracilis, the fasciculus gracilis, but now we also have the fasciculus cuneus, and we'll be talking about that as well. Okay, so then we had the nice cross sections of the brainstem. These are just things to point out, but today we're going to be concerned with, as we said, the anterior funiculi. All right, so we're going to be dealing with axons in this region for the ALS tract. We're also going to be concerned with the nucleus gracilis, nucleus cuneus, with the DCML tract. And then when we talk about trigeminal, we'll talk about the spinal thalamic tract of trigeminal, and then the spinal nucleus overall. And so again, this is the caudal medulla, kind of looks like an owl. Okay, then we have more rostral caudal medulla, and here we have the three amigos, 1, 2, and 3. And so those are nucleus gracilis, nucleus cuneus, and then the spinal nucleus of 5. And so these are our friends today, even though we're maybe a little bit overwhelmed, but we'll be okay. And then we start to have the appearance of this guy right here, and this is the medial lemniscus and the VTTT, the ventral trigeminal tract. Okay, we can do this. All right, then we have continuation of the ALS tract. These are just axons. We'll talk about the orientation. Again, the purpose here is not to go over the tracks, but just to reorient ourselves to the cross sections of the brainstem. All right, now we're mid-medulla, and we have this sort of the leafy thing going on. And again, we're concerned with this region right here, and this region right here, and then this region right here, okay? Do I need to know all the other stuff? Theoretically for old review exam stuff, but not right now. All right, so spinal thalamic of 5, then we have medial lemniscus and VTT, right? We'll have two pathways travel together, and then we have our ALS axons coming up, okay? So medulla 3 amigos, medulla leafy, medulla bulldog. All right, rostral medulla is bulldog. All right, rostral, bulldog, nostrils. Bulldogs have weird nostrils. All right, then we get to pons. All right, so now we're here. We have caudal pons. This is our Darth Vader guy. And we notice that, so 5 is still here with us a little bit. But the axons from these guys have gone into VTT. And then here we have, again, ALS ascending upwards. All of these guys are like, hey, I'm looking for the thalamus. All right, so caudal pons, Darth Vader, caudal pons, Darth Vader. All right, now we have more mid-pons, and again, you're like, pons? How do I know pons? Because you have the 4th ventricle overall. All right, again, we're going to be concerned with this region right here, which is medial lemniscus and VTT, and then this guy right here, which is ALS coming up. Same thing, rostral pons, looks like our purse. Okay, and again, you're like, 4th ventricle pons, got it, crushing it. Okay, next we're getting up to caudal midbrain. And so here we have our nice friend, the frog. And again, DC-ML in the form of the medial lemniscus. And then ALS, we also have VTT here. And then finally, rostral midbrain. And all of these tracks today are going to our friend, the thalamus, which we remember is part of the diencephalon, because we say the diencephalon and the for thalamus and hypothalamus. Okay, so a little scary, but we can do this. We'll keep at it. All right, so we have our dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway. All right, so this is a combination of our notes and from our friend Ninja Nerd. So what is the function of the DCML pathway? It is discriminative touch. We're crushing it. All right, so right, 2 fingers. Are you feeling 2 fingers or are you just feeling a finger? Then we have pressure, stretch, and vibrations. Proprioception, specifically conscious proprioception. So fine touch, pressure, stretch, and vibrations, and then proprioception, where are our limbs, how are they moving, so we don't fall over. Okay, discriminative touch is 2-point touch, crushing it. Proprioception, knowing where you are in space, also crushing it. Again, conscious for DCML, perhaps maybe think of the C and DC for conscious. All right, the types of fibers that are used here are A, beta fibers. They're heavily myelinated and medium diameter. And DCML is an ascending track. We're going to have our axons coming up like this from the different spinal levels. All right, and so the idea is that we get the stimulus of, again, discriminative touch, 1 finger versus 2 fingers, pressure, stretch, and vibrations, and they come in through our pathway up to the thalamus, and then from the thalamus, they're going to go to our final portion of the cerebrum cortex, the somatosensory cortex, all right, which we can see here. Okay, so what is going on with this pathway? So the basic premise is that we have our first order axons, which are bringing in our sensory information. They have our their nucleus in the dorsal root ganglion. They come in and send their axons up the funiculus cuneatus if they're dealing with your like arms. And then for lower limbs, they are sending this first axon through the fasciculus gracilis. All right, and you think lower limbs, gracilis, G, there's a gracilis muscle in your legs, so you remember gracilis, G, lower limbs in the fasciculus gracilis. All right, so that's the first, that is the first neuron. The second neuron is going to synapse. Its body is located in the nucleus cuneatus and the nucleus gracilis, and it's going to synapse with the first axon there, and then it's going to send its fibers out in these, it's axons out in these internal arcuate fibers, which are going to come and cross the midline and then ascend as the medial lemniscus. All right, so this is occurring in the medulla. All right, so we go back to our slides here, medulla, and you think medulla is the three amigos, so this is occurring in the three amigos. Okay, so we have our second order axon coming up, and now it's going to synapse in the thalamus, and then from the thalamus, it's going to the third axon, and this is in the VPL part of the thalamus, and that stands for ventero-posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. Okay, and then that guy is going to send its axons through the corona radiata, which we'll see in a second, to the cerebral cortex, specifically the somatosensory cortex, which we can see here. Okay, somatosensory cortex. All right, so this is the diagram from lecture. It's saying the exact same thing. So we have our first order axons coming in, and its body is in the dorsal root ganglion. You have, for T5 and above, this guy's coming in. He will be more lateral, and so this is organized. The most medial one is sacral, then thoracic, or excuse me, sacral, then lumbar, then thoracic, then cervical, right? And so T5 and above is going to be part of the cuneatus. T6 and below is going to be part of the gracilis. And you think to yourself, where did the cuneatus first appear, right? T5. Okay, I've seen T5 and T6, so this lecture said T5. We're going to go with T5. All right, so this guy is saying what we just talked about, but again, the first order neurons are going to have their body in the dorsal root ganglion. They're going to ascend via the fasciculus gracilis and the fasciculus cuneatus. They're going to get to, all right, so here it says fasciculus cuneatus is T6 to caudal medulla, and the fasciculus gracilis is T7 to S5. They're going to ascend until they get to the caudal medulla, where we see the three amigos, and they're going to synapse in two of those three amigos. Okay, so here let's just see, we have first order axon coming in, gets to the fasciculus gracilis, we ascend, here's just more coming in, we ascend, more coming in, again, DCML pathway, this is fine touch, vibration, conscious proprioception. All right, we ascend. Now we've made it to the nucleus cuneatus and the nucleus gracilis, and so now we're going to have our second order axon, our second order neuron. Its little body is right here, and it's going to synapse with our first order neuron, and then it's going to send its fibers out, and these fibers are the internal arcuate fibers. All right, so these are our internal arcuate fibers right here, and they're going to go ahead and cross the midline and get to what we call the medial lemniscus. So this orange region right here is the medial lemniscus. Okay, now that they've gotten to the medial lemniscus, it's going to go ahead and ascend to, again, this was our three buddies, the three amigos in the caudal medulla. It's going to ascend to the mid medulla, and notice this guy right here is still our medial lemniscus, and we're going to find out later that for the trigeminal, the VTT of the trigeminal travels with the medial lemniscus. All right, and so we talked a tiny bit about organization. Previously, we said it was sacral, lumbar, thoracic, cervical. That has continued to be the case, but now it's sort of rotated. So sacral, lumbar, thoracic, cervical. All right, that's what we have. All right, second order ascends through the rostral medulla. All right, caudal pons. You can see that we've rotated a little bit. And then mid pons, we've rotated even more. All right, and so you have C is towards the center, okay, whereas out here, so C was towards the outside, cervical was towards the outside, sacral is towards the inside, and then you get down here, C is towards, the middle part of the brainstem, and you ascend, again, still, we have medial lemniscus, also VTT, as we'll find out later. Then we continue, send our axon, and we're finally getting to our destination. We're almost there. Here's more medial lemniscus, so we send even further, and now we have finally made it. We are in the VPL nucleus of the thalamus, all right? And so that's where our third order axon has its body. It's going to go ahead and synapse with the second axon, and then it's going to send its projections through this darkly stained region, which we know in fact is our white matter, and it's going to send its axons out to the cortex right here, the somatosensory cortex. All right, but this region right here is the corona radiata. They're just white axon tracks. All right, and then this image right here is a zoom in of the thalamus. So this is our second order guy coming in. This is our third order. And you can see VPL. We're also going to be concerned with VPM today, but not for this particular tract. All right, so that's DCML. Not too bad. Again, discriminatory touch, pressure, stretch, vibrations, conscious proprioception. All right, we got this DCML. Okay. All right, then we have, what if something goes wrong? All right, so we remember that our three amigos is where we have a switch at the level of the three amigos, the caudal medulla. We have a switch from ipsilateral, same side, to contralateral. All right, and so if you have an issue before that in the spinal cord, before the gracilis, nucleus gracilis or nucleus cunatus, then you'll have an ipsilateral deficit, right? So if you have a lesion on spinal cord, right, this region in blue, to right before the nucleus gracilis, ipsilateral. If you have it in this region over here, so basically anywhere past that through the medial lemniscus up to the VPL of the thalamus, then you're going to have a contralateral deficit, okay? So then where do you get bilateral deficits? Well, we said that we crossed the midline when we were at our three amigos. We send those arcuate fibers over to the medial lemniscus. So we had our arcuate fibers, and they're crossing the midline. So if you get a cut right there, or a lesion for some reason right there, then you're going to have a bilateral deficit. And so that's what we see with something called tabes dorsalis, neurosyphilis. So you have these syphilis presumably attacks the dorsal root ganglion cells, causes degeneration of dorsal root columns bilaterally. Okay, so this particular disease, you're saying that what we're talking about is if you attack these guys on both sides, but then you could also have a case of, so that's one source of bilateral lesion if you attack both sides at the same time. But the other case is, as we were just talking about, if you destroy these arcuate nuclei, as they are crossing like right here, so if you have an issue right here, then you could have a bilateral lesion. Okay, so what happens if you have a lesion? Well, just think, what does DCML do? Loss of fine touch, texture discrimination, loss of conscious proprioception, and like kinesthesia, which I believe is knowing where you are. So proprioception, and then 2-point discrimination, aka fine touch, loss of vibratory sense, and then astrogenosis, which is recognizing object by touch. Okay. So Romberg test is basically to check for DCML damage. You have them stand with their feet close together, hands at the side, eyes closed, and then without the visual cues, this patient's going to fall over because they can't feel their feet, right? Because, again, conscious proprioception, can't feel their feet. And you also have, your fine sensation, and yeah. All right, so then Romberg, how do you remember that? Well, Romberg sounds like Zoidberg to me, and you remember Zoidberg always wears his little feet sandals. All right, maybe that's helpful, maybe that's not. All right, so then next is our second pathway, and this is really long, but as we said, we're trying our best. This is hard. We have the spinal thalamic tract, also called the anterolateral system, ALS. It's an ascending pathway that carries pain, all right? Pain, ALS, spinal thalamic tract, is pain. Also itching, and then temperature, and then crude touch, right? Something touching me overall versus the two fingers that we saw in DCML. Okay, so you have two different types of fibers being used. You have the A delta fibers, which is a relatively fast pathway, not as fast as A beta that we saw in DCML, but relatively fast. They are myelinated, smaller diameter than the A beta fibers we saw in DCML. Then you have the C fibers, which is like our slow path. They're unmyelinated with a very tiny diameter, all right? But the basic idea is that the spinal thalamic tract is going to take pain, itch and temperature, and cold touch, okay? So basically what's going to happen is you have your first order axons are going to come in, and then you have something called the tract of Lissauer, which is located like right here. And our first order axons will come in, they'll synapse here with the second order axon, or they can ascend up one level or down one level, or then they'll synapse with the second order axon. All right, but this is occurring we're familiar with the dorsal horn, right? Okay, so first order axon comes in, it synapses at the dorsal horn, or it ascends in the tract of Lissauer. Okay, and then you think to yourself, well, what is this tract doing? This is pain, itch, temperature, crude touch. And so that means that you have, this is one spinal level, two spinal levels, three spinal levels. Three spinal levels can all be, affected by, the same pain sensation. All right, so then we get to our second axon, and so our second neuron. So let's just start with our first neuron again. First neuron, its body is in the dorsal root ganglion, just as we saw with DCML. It synapses in the dorsal horn, again, that's this region right here. And collaterals can get multiple info from multiple levels, which we saw with the tract of Lissauer. And then it will synapse in the substantia gelatinosa part, which is right here. And you may remember that this substantia gelatinosa are very prominent in the lumbar and sacral regions, okay? We are now on the second order neuron, so this guy right here. Its body is located in the dorsal horn, and it is going to project across the midline and ascend in the spinothalamic tract, which we have to go way, way, way back here to, it is part of the anterior funiculi, okay? So, technically, anterior lateral funiculi, right? That's why we call it the anterior lateral system, but the funiculi in this region. Okay, so second order neuron here, it's going to cross across the anterior white commissure, which we can see here. Okay, and then it's going to ascend in the spinothalamic tract, which we know we have the lateral funiculi and the anterior funiculi right there. All right, so up we go. And you can see that here. First order coming in, second order synapsing, crosses the midline at the anterior white commissure. It ascends, ascends, ascends. It's going to send some branches off into the reticular formation, and then continue ascending, 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 and then it's going to go to the thalamus. We love the thalamus today. And then it will deliver this information to the somatosensory cortex, just like with DCML. And then it's important to know, we had this mentioned in lecture, an engineer covered this a bit more, but the information that's coming from the reticular formation is actually going to go to part of the brain that controls like emotion, so it will go to the amygdala. All right, so this is the diagram we got from lecture, but again, so now we're on our secondary neuron, we ascend, again, we're in this spinothalamic tract in the anterior funiculi and lateral funiculi. So he ascends, we have more coming in, ascend. Now we're getting to caudal medulla, but we're still ascending. And the nice thing is our organization is relatively consistent. So here we can see CTLS, and then we have CTLS. This was not emphasized in lecture because it doesn't do the twisting that DCML does. All right, so this ascends, and keeps going. Notice how it's adjacent to the medial lemniscus, right? And then it is going all the way here. Still spinothalamic tract adjacent to the medial lemniscus, and then it's going to synapse in the thalamus, in particular, also in VPL, which we said was the same thing that the DCML pathway synapse in the ventero-posterolateral nucleus. Okay, so we synapse there, and then our third order nuclei, or third order neuron, is going to send its axons out to the somatosensory cortex. All right, so you have pain, temperature, crude touch, and pressure, and pathway is pretty much just, cross the midline very early on in the anterior white commissure, then get to the anterior lateral funiculi, and then just ascend until you get to the thalamus. And when you're in the thalamus, then you're going to synapse in VPL, and then your third order neuron is going to go to the somatosensory cortex. All right, so it's very similar to DCML. Okay, so what if you have some lesions? Well, the nice thing is that this can be a little bit straightforward. So we have unilateral lesion of the lateral spinothalamic tract will produce a loss of pain and temperature in the contralateral body, because the idea is, right, if you have an issue anywhere past this point, it's going to be contralateral, right? And so the only way to get sort of an ipsilateral same side is if you have something wrong with your dorsal root ganglion overall. Okay, so then if you wanted a bilateral, nobody wants this. If you have a lesion of that affected the anterior white commissure, then you could get a bilateral change, right? Because you're having your second order axons coming and passing through this region overall before they ascend in the anterolateral funiculi. Okay, here's just a syndrome, basically ischemic damage to the posterior thalamus. And so if you're damaging VPL, then you're going to damage neurons that receive DCML and ALS information. And so loss of fine touch from DCML, loss of conscious proprioception, and then difficulty localizing pain and temperature, and that's from ALS, but not good. So this Day-Gerine-Rousey syndrome is something wrong with the thalamus, and it's going to affect both DCML and ALS, but it's the VPL neurons in particular of the thalamus. So if that's an issue, DCL ALS is going to have a problem. All right, so moving on. Now we have the trigeminal pathways. Again, we're trying our best. You can do this, guys. You may remember that the trigeminal nerve is innervating sensory innervation of the face, and then it also causes chewing, right? So we have temporal muscle, and then we have our muscles in the jaw, and it will include some of innervation of the tongue, but we have three divisions of the trigeminal nerve. You have V1, which is ophthalmic, which you think, okay, eyelid, or eye, forehead, upper eyelid, cornea, part of the nose, right, this whole region, mucous membrane of the nasal vestibule, right, so nose, frontal sigmoid sinuses, cranial dura, and then specifically we're told to know this. This goes through the superior orbital fissure. All right, so ophthalmic, V1, and then superior orbital fissure. Then we have maxillary, which is right here, that was not maxillary. This is maxillary right here, and this is going to be upper cheek, upper lip, lower eyelid, and lateral part of the nose, posterior part of the nose, part of the temple, and then mucous membranes of the upper mouth, right? And it goes to the foramen rotundum. And then finally, we have mandibular, V3. This is the one that does chewing. So it's the only one with motor fibers and then sensory fibers. And it goes through the foramen ovale. And then another thing to be aware of, so mandibular does chewing, and you're like chewing, mouth, tongue. Okay, so sensation of tongue, great. And then you think mandibular is also, right, it's the jaw, so just, trace your jaw up. That's going to include part of the ear. So this includes the ear as well, sensation of the part of the ear that's adjacent to the temple. And then finally, you have the dura mater and here's projections of the dura mater, is innervated by all three branches of the trigeminal nerve. Okay, so the question is, we have sensory information, we have one motor fiber, and we need to do something with that information. So we're going to, if it's sensory, you betcha we're going to send it up to the thalamus, our relay station, right? Thalamus is relay station, to the somatosensory cortex. All right, so we already kind of know, 1 and 2 of our three pathways is going to be ultimately thalamus to cortex. And then our third one is motor, which is going to go back to reflexes and how to chew. Okay, so let's get to it. You can already see we have a nice trigeminal ganglion, and that's going to lead into the brainstem. So let's just get to it. All right, so our first of 3 pathways is our pain pathway. You think to yourself, we are going to crush this. We know where this is going to happen. It's going to go to the thalamus, and then it's going to go to the somatosensory cortex. We love it. All right, so, and you can see our homunculus diagram right. This is the face. All right, so first part is, what's the function of the pain pathway of the trigeminal nerve? Well, you know it, deliver pain, just like this lecture is maybe doing to us. Then we have temperature and light touch information from cranial nerve 5. All right, all parts of the face need this information, right? So this is going to come from V1, V2, V3. Okay, perfect. Now we have our first order neurons, and the body is going to be in the trigeminal ganglion, which we see right here. And it is going to descend. All right, so it's a little bit weird. The pain pathway is descending, and then it's going to synapse in the nucleus of 5. All right, so it's weird. It's descending, and then it's going to ascend. All right, so first order guy is going to descend along the spinothalamic tract of 5, and then it's going to synapse in the nucleus of 5 right here. All right, so our second order neuron is going to be in the spinal nucleus of 5, and then it's going to project across the midline. And we mentioned this a couple of times before, but we have our friend medial lemniscus from DCML, right? You may remember, we had our 3 amigos in DCML, and 2 of those sent out its internal arcuate fibers, and then it went to ML. So this time, we're going to go ahead and synapse in the 3rd amigo, all right, number 3, and then we're going to go ahead and send our axon contralaterally into medial lemniscus. Technically, it's not medial lemniscus, but it travels with the medial lemniscus, the same area, VTTT. All right, we just love it when our professors are just like VTTT, ML, and you're like, what? It's like slightly uncool. Okay, so then we have, so the second order neuron is in the spinal nucleus of 5, and again, located here. And then it's going to send its axons contralaterally, right? It's going to go like this into VTT, which travels with ML, and then it's going to ascend with our friend ML all the way to the thalamus. All right, and so the third nucleus is in VPM, not VPL, VPM. And it turns out that VPM in the thalamus, right, this is the cross-section of the thalamus. Here's VPL, which has ALS and DCM. VPM is trigeminal, okay? So let's go ahead and trace this out. Oh, and then finally, our third order nucleus is going to send its final limb to the internal capsule of the post-central gyrus, which right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and trace this out. Again, what we're looking at, this is the thing given in lecture, and my goodness, but it's this guy right here. We're coming down, spinal thalamic tract of 5, we love it, and then it's going to go ahead and synapse here in the spinal nucleus, and then the spinal nucleus is going to be like, I'm going contralateral to VTT, and then I'm going to send up VTT, which is actually traveling with the DCML, medial lemniscus tract, and then we're going to go to our thalamus, and then from our thalamus, we're like, we need to tell our brain that the face is hurting, so we're going to go to the posterior central gyrus, which you could say is part of the somatosensory cortex, which is here. Okay, so first off, right, trigeminal ganglion is where our cell body is, and right, it has its senses coming out here. Maybe it's part of V1, maybe it's part of V2, maybe it's part of V3. Anyways, so it's this little dendrites, and now it's axons coming down, and it's going to synapse in the, so right here is the spinal tract of 5, so it's coming down this, and then it's going to synapse in, and this is caudal medulla, right? We were thinking the 3 amigos. We love the 3 amigos. They're our friends. It's going to synapse here in the third of the 3 amigos, the spinal nucleus of 5, and it's going to send its little axon across the second nucleus, or the second neuron, and it's going to go contralateral to VTT, which is ventral trigeminal tract. How do you get 3 T's? T, T, T. Okay. Then that guy is going to ascend with DC, the medial lemniscus pathway, which I've highlighted on this other side, but this is VTT and medial lemniscus. It's going to go up. It's going to go up. So caudal medulla, mid medulla, rostral medulla, the guy's going up. Here we're still with VTT and ML, medial lemniscus, ventral trigeminal tract. All right, then we get to more of that in the rostral midbrain. We're getting so close to the thalamus. And then we get to, this is part of the thalamus right here. So diencephalon, remember, is V diencephalon for thalamus and hypothalamus. So now we synapse with our third order guy in VPM. And VPM stands for ventral posteromedial nucleus of the thalamus. All right, and so then we, from there, from VPM, ventral posteromedial nucleus, we end up in the somatosensory cortex, specifically the post-central gyrus. All right, and so what we're doing, delivering pain and temperature and light touch information. All right, so we are crushing it. So that was pathway number 1, right? We said pain, and now we got to do touch. Okay, so pathway number 2 is all about touch. And this one is a little bit different. So far we've gone with stuff that was, kind of similar to the, this one's similar too. Basically, let's start with the function. So we have deliver discriminative tactile touch, tactile is touch, and vibration, fine touch information on the face from cranial nerve 5. And again, all parts of the face need this. So V1, V2, V3, all given input. The first order neurons are located right there. They're going to go to the chief sensory nucleus, is where they're synapsing, whereas we had the sort of spinal nucleus of 5. Now we're in the chief or principal nucleus of 5, okay? So spinal nucleus of 5 is what we were dealing with our third amigo. But now we are in the mid-pons region, all right? So we got our pons right here, and this is, so spinal nucleus, this is chief nucleus, okay? Chief nucleus in the pons region. Right, so we can see that right here. Okay, and so we've come in, first order is going to go ahead and synapse in the spinal nucleus, the principal nucleus of 5, which is continuation of spinal nucleus, and it's in the mid-pons, and it's going to send, the second order nucleus is going to send projections via the dorsal trigeminal thalamic tract and the ventral VTT, ventral trigeminal thalamic tract. Okay, so it's going to send ipsilaterally up the DTT and then contralaterally up VTT. Okay, so this is one piece of information from a lecture that I found to be insanely irritating, but we're doing our best. We have not had VTT labeled anywhere. And it's not on anything the M2s give us. We're trying our best here. We know that VTT, all right, so this is where we're synapsing right here. We got our first order guy coming in, synapses with our second order guy. And now our second order guy is like, I'm going to send out ipsilaterally, and then I'm going to send out contralaterally VTT, and then DTT is ipsilaterally. And you're like, okay, well, where is VTT? Well, VTT is with medial lemniscus, so we got that, it's right there. And that's going to go up, it's going to go to the thalamus. And then this guy right here, and we just we love the thalamus. Thalamus is relay station, we remember that from the MCAT. So then we have this guy coming up, and it's going through DTT. And so based on the diagram and looking online, it looks like DTT is maybe traveling with VTT, or medial lemniscus on the ipsilateral side, okay? This may be wrong, and it's a level of detail that we don't need for the lecture, but the basic idea is that just as long as you know, we synapse in the chief nucleus of 5, so we synapse in spinal nucleus of 5 for the first pathway. Here we're synapsing in the chief nucleus of 5 in the pons, so it's nucleus of 5 no matter what, and then here we're going to just go up via DTT or VTT. So as long as you know you have ipsilateral and contralateral is VTT, DTT is ipsilateral. All right, and then so you're going up, traveling with medial lemniscus, and then you go down, and you're going to end up in our friend the thalamus, right? You're ventricle. This is third ventricle. Third ventricle, and then you're this is my guy. This is the diencephalon. And so you're hypothalamus, and you're thalamus. And so part of the thalamus, and so you're this is part of the thalamus, in particular VPN is where we get our third order axon. So now we have our third order nucleus, and that's going to send upwards to our final destination, post-central gyrus. Again, post-central gyrus right here of the somatosensory cortex. Okay. All right, so not too bad, very doable. The only real differences between the touch pathway and the pain pathway. Pain, you think this has got to be extra hard, it's painful, so it's got to descend first, and then touch, you're It's not painful. We're just going to go chief sensory, and then we're going to go up, okay? And touch, you're like maybe 2 fingers, so you split, and you're like, you got DTT ipsilaterally and VT contralaterally. All right, so not too bad. Now we have chewing. So this one is, again, delightfully low on information from the lecture, which is maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing. But the idea is that the third pathway is all about being able to chew. So we have, you need to know where your jaw is. So you're going to deliver proprioception, movement information to regulate chewing. And the nice thing is that we have, it is relatively straightforward. The first order neuron is always the same. It's always going to come from our trigeminal that controls chewing. So it's always going to be from mandibular. Then it's going to synapse in this region called the mesencephalic nucleus. All right, this is where things get kind of weird. The second order is not consistent. It can go here, it can go here, and we're going to talk about that as we get to the reflexes. All right, but basically you have proprioception of chewing, you have V3, and it's going to come in and synapse on this mesencephalic nucleus of 5. All right, so you think to yourself, trigeminal pathway, step 1, you're always going to go to some nucleus of 5. You're either going to go to spinal thalamic for pain. For touch, you're going to go to chief, principal in the mid-pons, and then for chewing, you're going to go to mesocephalic nucleus of 5. All right, and so what does that look like? Well, here's the mid-pons, right? You're like, here's the 4th ventricle, so there must be pons. And then on this side, here we have nucleus of 5, and so here's the chief nucleus of 5, here's motor nucleus of 5, and here's the mesencephalic nucleus of 5. So first order axon is going to come in, and then its cell body of the first order is right here, and then it's going to send out axons to the chief nucleus of 5, motor nucleus of 5, or up to the cerebellum. Okay, so basically what we're doing is we're taking motor spindle joint receptor information, peripheral nerves, V1 through V3, so nerves that will allow us to know where we are, right? So things to do with the muscles of the eye, and then mastication, teeth, hard palate, etc. The body's in the mesencephalic nucleus of 5, and primary projections are to the trigeminal motor nucleus, which is going to send out information back to those muscles. Okay, so basically, conscious proprioception is conveyed. So if we're going to go send a pathway through VTT, so say our first order comes in, mesencephalic, go to chief, chief goes to VTT or DTT ipsilaterally, and so you could get conscious proprioception of chewing. Unconscious is conveyed to the cerebellum. All right, so you have this for chewing coming in from the mandibular, you go to mesencephalic nucleus, then you can go to the chief motor part and then send back to the muscles, be like, hey, move this way. You can go to the, I'm sorry, this is chief, this guy's chief right there, and then that one will go up for conscious proprioception of the muscles of the jaw, and then here is motor, and this will send back to control the jaw muscles. Okay, all right, and then finally you could also go to the cerebellum. All right, in terms of reflexes, this is hopefully a little bit more straightforward. So you have the jaw jerk reflex, it's tap on the chin and with the mouth slightly open, and the mouth tends to close. So the afferent limb, right, afferent is bringing sensation in, is going to be our friends V3 from the V3 mandibular, part of V5, and or cranial nerve 5, excuse me, it's getting long. And it's going to go ahead and synapse in the trigeminal. So its nucleus is located where it always is for motor information, motor pathway. Mesencephalic nucleus of 5, it's motor, M. And then it's going to, for the jaw jerk reflex, if you touch the chin in midline with mouth still open, mouth tends to close. So you're like, information, somebody's touched my face, my jaw, and then it sends to the trigeminal motor, and then this is going to go back to the masseter muscle. All right, so that's what this is saying. Somebody touched my jaw. Somebody touched my jaw. That's this guy right here. Its nucleus is located in mesencephalic. Then it sends information to the motor nucleus of 5, right? This is a reflex. And then that's like, hey, go ahead and close that jaw. And so it's going to the muscles of mastication. All right, corneal reflex is we're familiar with clinical skills, stimulate one cornea and both eyes to close. Basically, you go ahead and touch the cornea. Closing is called the direct reflex of the stimulated eyes, direct reflex. Closing of the opposite eye is called the consensual response. And so this is going to be ophthalmic nerve, right? Eye, ophthalmic. And so you have sensory information coming in, right? That's this guy right here. It's going to go to the spinal nucleus of 5. And then from there, it's going to go to facial motor nuclei, which we haven't talked about. And then that's going to send a neuron up to the muscles controlling the eye, the orbiculus oculi muscles. All right, so the corneal reflex actually has 3 neurons involved. We only have 2 in the jaw jerk. All right, so here's this again. You have the first order coming in. Cell bodies located in the trigeminal ganglion, synapses in the spinal nucleus of 5. Then it goes, second order has its cell body here, spinal nucleus of 5, but it's going to send an axon to the facial nucleus, and then that's going to send an efferent signal to the orbicularis oculi. All right, finally, clinical correlations. We have trigeminal neuralgia, so basically severe pain to this region, and it's from basically some sort of issue attacking the trigeminal nerve, multiple sclerosis, Charcot-Marie tooth disease, but not good. And then you have herpes zoster shingles, and it's infection of the dermatome, and it's going to affect sensory ganglia and cutaneous nerves and affects T3L1, but some have infection of the trigeminal nerve, and it includes a rash and a pain. But you can see this here, it's just herpes zoster, aka shingles, and it's going to affect the trigeminal nerve, and so pain. All right, what if you have lesions? So if you have central lesions on the medulla or the pons, right? Medulla would be nucleus of 5 tract going down, and then it also have the spinal nucleus of 5, and then pons has the chief nucleus of 5 and mesencephalic nucleus. So if you have a central lesion in the medulla or the pons, this would be Pica or Wallenberg syndrome. And so a lesion here, and you're going to affect the nuclei here, 5, and you'll have ipsilateral pain loss and of the face, and then we have our anterolateral system, ALS, located here, and then here's M.L.VTT, right, M.L.VTT. So you're going to have contralateral pain loss right there from ALS, okay? And yeah. All right, cavernous sinus syndrome caused by vascular inflammatory neuroplastic infectious disease. It damages 3, 4, 6, and then trigeminal 1 and 2. And basically a lesion to this region right here. And right, we would have, so this is, we got pons here, right, Vader, 4th ventricle. So you have ALS going right here, and you got VTT and ML, so this is going to be bad for all of our guys. So contralateral loss for medial lemniscus, because we're past, if we're here, we're past the 3 friends, 3 amigos, and then we know with, well, ALS might be a little bit more lateral, so we'll be fine. Okay, so that's it. As we said, this was really hard. I think, you guys are doing awesome, and I hope you're not discouraged, but good job, guys. We're going to crush this exam.